G'day guys, I want to talk to you about one of the exciting new features for the Chaos Space Marines in 10th edition Warhammer 40k, and that is Dark Pacts. I see a lot of people debating whether or not you want to go for the sustained hits or the lethal hits. I see a lot of people debating the maths and the probability of this and getting it completely wrong, or at least lots of it wrong. So what I want to do today is talk about this in a much deeper level and talk about the actual impact of this exciting rule on the tabletop in games of Warhammer 40k. I will be following this up with a full review of the Chaos Space Marine datasheets just like I did for the World Eaters. However, that's going to take a little bit of time to put together, so be patient with me. And for now, let's just talk about the Dark Pacts, which is the army rule for Chaos Space Marines in 10th edition.
Look for the blood god.
G'day guys, I'm planning to record and release an entire video talking about every single one of the Chaos Space Marine datasheets and all of the Chaos Space Marine rules, but I wanted to hit you guys with this quick one because I think it's something that I see a lot of people get wrong, and I want to get this out there to try and help you guys out as early as I can, even though I do have more in-depth content planned on this topic for the coming weeks. But what I want to talk about is Dark Pacts, and the ability that Chaos Space Marines have where basically each time they're selected to shoot or fight, they can do a Dark Pact and they gain either sustained hits or lethal hits. And then after they do this, after they're activated, they do a leadership check and potentially take mortal wounds. Now, I get a lot of people debating which pact you should go for. Should you go for the sustained hits or should you go for the lethal hits? And they debate the maths on it. And I think what they're doing is they're overlooking a really critical part about these sorts of decisions in a game. So I basically want to break that down for you here. Now, the way it works is, the way people generally approach this is they go, okay, cool. Let's say you're wounding on a 4+, right? And you're shooting at something. Well, that means you have a 50-50 chance of wounding them. So if you have one shot, and you go lethal hits, right? And you roll a 6 to hit, you're going to get 1 wound. Whereas if you go sustained hits, you're going to get 2 hits, and then of those hits, you're now wounding on 4s, so you got a 50-50 chance, which means you're equally likely to roll no wounds as you are to roll 2 wounds, because it's 50-50, and on average, you're going to roll 1 wound. So people would say, okay, cool, if you're hitting on a 4+, it doesn't really matter which one you take. One is going to be an average of 1 wound, one is going to be a guaranteed 1 wound, but the one that's an average of 1 wound might spike up and it might spike down, so it's not that big of a deal, right? It's either way. And then they go, okay, but if you're wounding on a 2+ or a 3+, you're better off going with the sustained hits because you're highly likely to wound, so getting that automatic wound isn't as valuable as getting those additional hits. And if you're wounding on a 5+ or a 6+, you're better off going for the lethal hits because you're less likely to wound, and therefore getting those automatic wounds is of high value. And this is all very, very true. All of that is true, and you can write that down. That is a very good model to follow. However, it is not something that you should be following religiously. There are some certain situations, and these will come up more common than you might think, where it's actually advised to break this rule. And I'll give you one example, but you can extrapolate this out and understand the principle behind it and then make decisions accordingly. But let's say you're an obliterator, right? And you're targeting a Imperial Knight, right? So you got your big strength 14 shots, your strength 12 shots, sorry, into their, toughness 12 Knight. So you're wounding it on a 4+, right? So in this situation, the previous principle would dictate that, it doesn't really matter which one you choose. However, I'm going to make a case that the sustained hits is significantly better in certain, scenarios. So let's say you've shot your entire army at all these other targets, and all you have left to shoot is the obliterator into this knight. All right, so that's a critical part of this piece, is that this is the last thing to shoot, right? And you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, cool, if I roll perfectly average, I probably don't kill this knight, because I've got, say you got 2 obliterators, so you got 2d3 shots, so you're going to, if you get an average of 4 shots, of those 4 shots, you're going to get an average of like 3 hits maybe, and of those 3 hits, maybe one of them is a 6. Let's be generous and say one of them is a 6, so that one automatically wounds. And then of the other 2 hits, only one of those wounds. So 2 wounds go through. And then they're going to, let's say they've rotated their ion shield, so they've got a 4-up save. Or even if they haven't rotated their ions, either way, they're probably going to save 1, if we're being generous. So you're going to do 6 wounds. So that doesn't even kill the knight. So you might be like, okay, in that situation, you're actually better off going for the sustained hits, because you might look at the situation and be like, okay, if everything goes perfectly average, I don't kill that knight. So what I need to do, and if I don't kill that knight, it's now free in my opponent's turn to run amok and kill my obliterators, or shoot something else and then charge my obliterators, or whatever it is. They're gonna do damage. So I would really strongly value and really strongly benefit from a spike in damage output here that would kill the knight. And if I spike down and I don't kill the knight, well, that's the same as rolling average. It's functionally the same, because either way, if I roll average, I don't kill the knight, and if I spike low or they spike high on their saves and roll more successful saves than normal, then I don't kill the knight, and either way, that's the same. So in those situations, you're better off going for the sustained hits and just hoping, because now it's like, cool, if I get 2d3 shots, let's say you roll slightly high on that and you get 6 shots, right? And then you're like, cool, and now one of those 6 is a 6 to hit, which is 2 additional hits. So now you're getting, 7, potentially 7 hits. Say you miss a couple of your regular shots though, so you get, say, 6 hits. And then you go, cool, now I'm winning on 4s, so you roll slightly above average there. So out of your 6 hits, you wound, say, 4 times instead of the 3 that you would normally expect. So now you got 4 wounds through. And then let's say he's, on his 4-up save, and he fails 3 of them. It's just a slight deviation from the standard, which this happens. So none of the rolls that I've just put forward have been like hugely in our favor, and none of his rolls have been hugely against him. It's just he's rolled slightly lower than average, you've rolled slightly higher than average, and now you've just done 18 damage to that knight. And if it had already taken some damage, which we're assuming if it's rotated its ion shields, something has shot at it, so, or most likely something has shot at it. So if you are able to do 18 wounds to it, you might even be killing it at this stage, just through that slight spike in luck. And the reason that the sustained hits is better for this, because like the argument would be that you can still spike high with your luck on lethal hits, but lethal hits gives you less opportunities to spike, because when you roll that 6 to hit, if you do sustained, you now get to make 2 wound rolls, and that's increasing the opportunity for your dice to spike high. Whereas if you just take that 6 to hit and just say, I wound you, take your saves, you're actually stopping the train in its tracks. There's no more ability for it to spike high. So using the sustained, even though it's mathematically identical, more or less, you're giving yourself an opportunity to spike high. And this doesn't just apply to situations where you're winning on a 4+. There are some times when you're winning on a 5+, and the normal maths would dictate that you go with the lethal hits, because, getting an additional hit, but then you're rolling 5-ups to try to wound, you're probably not going to wound. On average, you probably don't wound, so, it's probably better to just take that 6 and call it a wound. But basically the same logic applies. There will be times where rolling perfectly average doesn't kill the target, and you don't have anything else within range of the target, so you have no other ways of dealing damage to the target. Maybe it's a really important target, like it's some element of their list that's really scary, or maybe it's an element of their list that's on an objective marker or something like that, and you just need it to die, and you're in a shit position because you don't have sufficient firepower to kill it with average dice. So you're like, well, now I'm not likely to kill this target, but I need to kill this target. And that's where we, as players, make a pact with the dark gods. So you need to just go, look, I'll do you a deal. Like I'll pick sustained hits, and I'll have some faith, and the universe will return by hopefully giving you those 6s to hit, and then hopefully giving you some successful wound rolls as well. It is worth noting that when you got 2d6, say you get 2 hits out of that 1 6 to hit because you went with sustained, and then you're now 5+ to wound, it's still likely. It's not it's not likely, but it's probable that you will roll 2 5s to wound and get 2 wounds. And had you gone with lethal, you would have only rolled 1 5, and therefore you would have only got 1 wound. So it's not unlikely that the sustained hits is going to do more damage to the target, even in cases where you were wounding on a 5+. So I think sustained hits, by and large, is probably generally the superior choice, depending on the situations, of course. Like if you're like, this unit has enough damage to overkill the target, so I don't want to be risky, and I don't want to, risk this, spiking down and then not killing the target, and then I'm fucked. So I just need to roll average here. Well, that's when you go, cool, I'm just going to go with the lethal hits, and I'm just going to take 1/6 of my hits and just turn them into automatic wounds, and now I don't have to fucking worry about that anymore. That's a much better way of doing it in those situations, but you'll have to sort of play this by ear, and there's tons of different scenarios where different things come into play. And then we get talking about like the different chaos marks, because obviously they impact your sustained hits and your lethal hits rolls, because they become a 5+ instead of a 6+. And this is why personally I think Mark of Nurgle is by far the superior mark. Not only because it triggers your sustained hits on a 5+, which is obviously, as we've just discussed, often going to be the better of the 2 options, but also because this Mark of Nurgle gives you access to the stratagem Dark Obscuration, and that's probably the most broken stratagem in the entire game. And I'm going to do a whole video on this stratagem, because this stratagem is absolutely broken, and I think it takes the Chaos Space Marines, which was like maybe a lower B tier faction, and it brings it up into the A tier, in my opinion, that stratagem alone. So being able to tell people that they can't target you anymore is so broken. But yeah, so Mark of Nurgle, sustained hits, is definitely, in my opinion, the way to go, more often than not. And then that then informs a lot of the other decisions that you'll make in your list. So for example, sustained hits is obviously way better on big guns and big melee attacks, right? Because every 6 to hit is getting you additional hits, and then you're wounding most things on either 2s or 3s because you're a big gun, which means you don't need the lethal hits. So I personally think that with all of this in mind, Chaos Space Marine lists should be prioritizing big weapons, big chunky guns like the Vindicator, the Obliterators, Forge Fiends, all of these units that just do massive damage and have high strength characteristics. And then all your small arms and your middle sort of weapons are somewhat less relevant. And then you've also got things like the Warp Talons who get reroll wounds, so you go, okay, cool, well if I'm rerolling all of my wounds, then I don't need to be getting auto wounds. I just want to go in and get a ton of hits. And if you've got unmarked units, you can use a stratagem to reroll all hit and wound rolls. So now sustained hits, once again, is vastly superior here because you're going to be re-rolling those wounds anyway, so you might as well go for the, in certain targets maybe not, but generally speaking, you want to go for the sustained hits, and now you hit 5+ to hit is generating an additional hit, and then you're re-rolling everything that's not a 5, so that you're getting more hits, and then you're going on with your wounds, and then you're re-rolling all your wounds. So it doesn't matter if you're only wounding on a 5, you're just like, cool, I'm just going to re-roll all my failed wounds because it's, because of the stratagem. It's massively powerful. So, yeah, I just wanted to address that because I see a lot of people saying that, lethal hits is better in a lot of ways. And I think whilst they are technically correct, I think they're overlooking a critical part of it, and that is that sometimes taking the riskier role that's on average going to do less damage but has the capacity to do more damage, sometimes that is the correct play. And I think a lot of people are overlooking that. And you probably get a lot of people giving you advice online that is giving you what, in my opinion, is incorrect or false advice. So I wanted to share that with you guys now. And then we'll go into this and all the data sheets in a lot more detail in the the full showcase that I'm working on in the coming weeks. So thanks for tuning in, guys, as always.
Alrighty guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. I really do hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, feel free to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. I love the conversations we have in that comment section below. And if you'd like to, you can head over to blogforthebloodgod.com where you can pick up merchandise. You can pick up a shirt like the one I'm wearing now. We've got neoprene gaming mats like the ones behind me. We've got objective markers. We've got really cool dice. We've got all kinds of different swag that you can purchase on that website that goes a long way towards supporting this channel and helping me increase the quality of this content, the frequency of the content, and it also picks up some sweet swag for yourself. So it's a true win-win situation if you head over to blogforthebloodgod.com. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Walk for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable,